Hey everybody, it's me, Rick Acosta, the Dodger Card Collector, coming to you with another video. Today's video, I'm going to take a highlight of the 1967 Topps posters, or 1967 Topps Pinup set that was released in 1967. I was going through some cards this weekend through storage in my boxes, and I stumbled upon my box that had the big cards. One of the things in my collection that I always do is every card is either in a binder, a penny sleeve, a top loader, a slab. I don't just have raw cards in my collection. I like them protected. And I've learned over the last year or two, I wasn't aware of top loaders, or large top loaders, I should say. So when I won this set, I'm going to show it off here. I won this set from Dean's Cards. And I know there are people right now going, oh, Dean's Cards. They are kind of pricey, but they also have some deals. And in this case, I picked up a really nice collection of this set for a little over $100. And it's a set I've always wanted. And it's just a nice big collection of big cards. Now, the 1967 set, one of the things that I really like about this Topps Pinup set, it's 32 player set, it's 5 inches by 7 inches, so a little longer than the cards that we're used to. Of the 32 cards, 16 of them were Hall of Famers. And of the 16 that are not Hall of Famers, they each have a story to tell, which is kind of the reason I wanted to talk about this set, just because whenever we show off our cards, and it's great when I'm the first one that says, I want to talk about Aaron or Mays or Koufax or Mantle. But there are other guys that had great careers that never made it to the Hall, and we don't talk about their cards or their careers very often. Case in point, Boog Powell, the #1 card in the set. 1970 MVP, had some great numbers playing with the Orioles. Obviously, when you have Brooks Robinson and Frank Robinson in the lineup, you're going to put up good numbers. But in 1970, Boog had one of his best years, and he won the 1970 AL MVP. And he is card #1 in this set. Next on my list is Bert Campaneris. Campy, I remember they just called him Campy Campaneris. 6-time stolen base leader from 1965 to 1972. And he was pretty much a terror for those A's teams that went to the World Series in the 70s. #3 on the set is Brooks Robinson. What I mentioned earlier about talking about Hall of Famers, in this case, when I show a Hall of Fame card, I'm going to talk about what they did specifically in 1967. Excuse me. And in Brooks Robinson's case, he won another Gold Glove. Coming off a big year where the Orioles won the World Series in 1966, Robinson put up some decent numbers, as he always did, but once again, he was the Gold Glove winner for that year in 1967. #4, Tommy Agee, Chicago White Sox, 1966 American League Rookie of the Year. Later went on to bigger fame with the New York Mets, where he won a World Series in 1969. But put up some good numbers for the Sox during his time, and eventually was reunited with his childhood friend Cleon Jones on the Mets. #5 was Carl Yastrzemski. Yaz. He won the Triple Crown that year. Up until Miguel Cabrera won it several years ago, this was the last time someone had won the Triple Crown. The funny thing is, and we're talking about the year of the pitcher, Yaz won the batting title with a .301 batting average. So batting averages had sunk to pretty low depths by that point. And Yaz led the Red Sox to the World Series that year, where they lost to the St. Louis Cardinals. All right, coming up is somebody you're all very familiar with, and that is Mickey Mantle. What can you say about Mantle that hasn't been said? As I told you, I'm going to stick with what he did in 1967. I won't talk about his career, because we always do that. But in 1967, Mantle hit his 500th home run. So that was the big deal back then for him. He went on to play one more year with the Yankees and retired after the 68 season. All right, the next card is Frank Howard. Frank Howard was the 1960 National League Rookie of the Year for the Dodgers. But in 1967, he was starting to really become Paul Bunyan. He didn't seem to have much of a career with the Dodgers. He seemed to struggle, and he almost retired at one point. But when they traded him to Washington, something seemed to awaken him. And in 1967, he hit 36 home runs, and he went on to a couple of home run titles in his career. This was a guy that when I was a kid, I was scared of just because he was so big. And I wish he'd get more recognition out there. Okay, number 8 in this set is Sudden Sam McDowell for the Cleveland Indians. He won the ERA title in 1965 with a 2.18 ERA. He also was a American League strikeout leader for 5 years. Had a really great career with the Indians. Eventually got traded to the Giants for Gaylord Perry. Things really went downhill at that point. I think he ended his career with the Yankees. And the next card on the list is the Hall of Famer Orlando Cepeda. Cepeda, at that point in 1967, he was the National League MVP. His big claim to fame for that year. All right, next card. Chico Cardenas, Leo Cardenas, but Chico was his nickname. He won the Gold Glove. So that's why I included him in this collection and why I'm talking about him in this set. I remember him in his later years with the California Angels. And, good glove, he could hit. And he played a long time. He had a good MLB career. All right, the next card is another Hall of Famer, Roberto Clemente. And for that year, Clemente won the 1967 batting title with an average of .357. He also led the NL with 209 base hits. I think I might have asked this in another video. If not, I'm going to ask it again. I don't think Clemente has one bad baseball card. He just took incredible photographs. And I would say this one's one of my favorites, but every time I look at a Clemente card, I say it's one of my favorites. So that's Roberto Clemente. Next up, we got some heavy hitters in this set. Willie Mays, 1967 Topps Pinups Willie Mays, using the same photo that was used in the 1966 Topps Basic set, or the Topps Base set, I should say. And what's my word for Mays back then? In 1967, he was voted again onto the National League All-Star team, and he won a Gold Glove. And that's Willie Mays. Willie Mays, with the exception of 1961, Willie Mays didn't take many bad photos for his baseball cards. All right, next. This was a rising player back then in 1967, Cleon Jones of the Mets. I remember him more from 1969. He was on the All-Star team. He led the Mets along with those great pitchers of Tom Seaver and Jerry Koosman and Cleon Jones and his childhood friend Tom Agee, who we talked about a moment ago, led the Mets to their first World Series in 1969. Nice looking card. Too bad all these cards are folded, but that's just the way it is. Okay, and next on my list is the 1964 All-Star MVP John Callison. Had a great career with the Phillies. I know that eventually he was traded to the Yankees. He doesn't get mentioned much. I need someone from Philadelphia to really put a good bio together for this guy. Okay, Hall of Famer again, Mr. Hank Aaron. What did Hank Aaron do in 1967? He was still hitting. He was already or still or continuing hitting home runs. He had 39 home runs, 113 runs batted in, and was definitely a force at this point for the Atlanta Braves, as Eddie Matthews by that point had pretty much retired or had been traded away to, I believe, the Tigers by that point. That's Hank Aaron. One of my favorite players, Mr. Don Drysdale. Now, by 1967, Drysdale had lost Sandy Koufax, and he'd kill me if I said that, but Koufax by then had retired. And Drysdale by that point had dipped to a record of 13-16. He only had 13 wins that year, but the Dodgers weren't a very good team. They rebuilt it. They started rebuilding when Koufax retired. They traded away Wills. They traded away John Roseboro. Drysdale had some injuries by this point. like I said, still voted to the All-Star team, still a scary-ass guy, and he is one of the Dodgers featured in this set. Now, I remember this guy when I used to intern for the Angels. Bobby Knopp, second base for the then California Angels. Won the Gold Glove at one point with the Angels. He played for the Angels for several years. As I mentioned to you, I met him when I used to intern for the Angels in college in the 90s, early 90s. He was like the third base coach for Buck Rogers. Nice man. Had a good career. Played roughly 12 years with the Angels and I believe the White Sox as well. Next card, newest inductee to the Hall of Fame, Mr. Tony Oliva. At this point, Tony had won two of his three American League batting titles. This was the first year he had a rough year. His batting average was .289. It's the first time in his career his batting average finished under 300. Was still voted onto the All-Star team. And that year he was also joined by another Hall of Famer. His name was Rod Carew. And together they put up some good numbers there along with Harmon Killebrew. So that's Tony Oliva. Another Hall of Famer. Like I said, this set is stacked. Frank Robinson coming off his 1966 American League MVP, where he won the Triple Crown. Robinson's numbers were still good in 67, not as good as 66, but in 67 he had 30 home runs, 94 RBIs, and a .311 batting average. That was pretty good for an Orioles team. Unfortunately, they didn't have the same luck they had in 66, but they would be back in 1969, 1970, 1971. All right, next up is Mr. Denny McLain, a future 30-game winner. But at this point, he was a 17-game winner with the Tigers in 1967. He also led the league in giving up the most home runs with 35. I always wondered, McLain would follow this up with two incredible years, 1968, 1969. And I always wonder what would have happened to his career if he had just stayed out of trouble. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case for him. So that's Denny McLain. Card number 21. You might think this is a familiar looking card, and it is. It's the 1967 Topps Pinups card of Al Kaline, but most of us will recognize this as the 1965 Topps base set card for Al Kaline. Kaline was still doing great things at this point, maintaining a steady batting average over in the 300s, won another Gold Glove, and he was picked for the All-Star team that year, the American League All-Star team. Al Kaline. All right. Card number 22 is Joe Pepitone of the New York Yankees, three-time All-Star. Joe was another misunderstood player. I think he could have had a better career than he did, and it would have been nice if the Yankees had been competitive in the late 60s to see what this guy could have done with them. He always seemed to be at odds. I just read Nice Guys Finished Last by Leo DeRocher, and DeRocher managed him on the Cubs, and he mentioned that Pepitone was nothing but a big drama queen. So curious to see what would happen to his career had he just had a good head on his shoulders. Here's another Twins Hall of Famer, Harmon Killebrew. This guy was really coming into his golden era, or in the middle of it. He finished second in the American League MVP that year, 44 home runs, led the American League in walks with 131. This guy was putting up some killer numbers, and that's how probably he got his nickname, the Killer. Harmon Killebrew, one of the great players from the Twins. The Twins had a lot of good players back then. All right, 1967, Leon Wagner. My memories of Wagner, and I only know this because I grew up in California, he did play with the then Los Angeles Angels expansion club. Two-time All-Star. His best year was 1962, 37 home runs, 107 RBIs. Finished fourth in the MVP. And the Angels traded him after the 1963 All-Star game. To this day, no one really says much about it. They traded him for Joe Adcock and another player to be named later. It just kind of started a trend that the Angels did in trading away some of the players they picked up in the early expansion draft. like Dean Chance and Leon Wagner. They did keep Jim Fregosi, but they traded away Wagner at that point to Cleveland. All right, next up is the card number 25, and it's a very young Joe Morgan. Morgan, by this point, was starting to establish his career. Had a .275 batting average and 29 stolen bases. His career really took off, though, obviously, when he was traded to the Reds, but it's nice to see him in an Astros card. And another Hall of Famer, along with Joe Morgan, was Ron Santo. Ron Santo, I found this interesting when I was looking up info of what he did in 1967. He did win the Gold Glove, but he also led the National League in walks. He walked 96 times. And I go, who was he batting in front of? Who was he batting behind of? And Santo batted cleanup. But batting in front of him was Billy Williams, and batting behind him was Ernie Banks. So he tended to get a lot of walks in those days. Great player, though, because he also won a lot. He was also good on the field, won several Gold Gloves. I always forget this guy was a catcher at one point. Joe Torre, catcher for the Atlanta Braves. By the time I started watching baseball, Joe Torre was the third baseman and first baseman for the Cardinals. But at this point, Joe Torre was an all-star catcher with the Braves. And eventually he was traded, I believe, for Orlando Cepeda. Possibly after this season, I think after 68 he was traded for Orlando Cepeda. But he had good numbers with the Braves, went on to the Cardinals and the Mets, and put up good numbers there too. He did not make it to the Hall of Fame, though, as a player, which I'm still surprised of. Made it as a manager with the New York Yankees. Arguably the best pitcher of the 60s. I believe he won the most games in the 60s, and that's Juan Marichal of the Giants. He had just come off 4 20-game win seasons, but in 1967, he fell to 14 wins, made the American League or the National League All-Star team. And then after this, he won 2 more after 67, he had 2 more 20-game win seasons in 68 and 69. So 67 was a rough year for Marichal. All right, getting down to the last few. Matty Alou of the Pirates, the 1966 batting champion, 342, 2-time All-Star. Went on to have a great career, was famous. The Alou brothers, Matty, Felipe, and Jesus. Always remembered them growing up. And speaking of the Alou brothers, here's Felipe Alou at card number 30 with the Atlanta Braves. 3-time All-Star. He had the most hits in the National League in 1966 and 1968. That's Felipe Alou. Now, I wish I was going to show you Jesus Alou next, but he's not in the set. So next, this card kind of bugs me. It's Dodger second baseman Ron Hunt. Obviously, he's in a Mets uniform. That summer, or the winter of 66 to 67, as I mentioned, the Dodgers started to clean house, and one of the players they got rid of was Tommy Davis. In return, they got Ron Hunt, a 2-time All-Star with the Mets. Dodgers didn't keep him very long. I think they traded him the following year, maybe for Ken Boyer. I'm not sure. And the last card of the set, Big Mac, Willie McCovey. 31 home runs. He also struck out 110 times, but he was on his way to having big years with the Giants in the late 60s and early 70s. And a stellar career. That's my 1967 Topps Pinup set. I highly recommend getting this set for the sheer reason of if you want vintage Hall of Fame players, great players from the 60s, you don't want to spend a whole bunch of money, get this set. Get the 1967 Topps Pinup set. Get the 1964 Topps Giants set. I think I might have to make a video of that one too. Great vintage cards of great players at very low prices. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me today. I hope to have a video next week. I'm waiting for an extremely big card to show off to you guys. But until then, we'll see you next time. Take care.